It was 2:41 p.m. at Terminal B when a German Shepherd named Ranger barked once, sharply, and then froze in place. In a terminal full of noise, motion, and rolling luggage, his stillness spoke volumes. His handler, Officer Grant Maxwell, tried to coax him forward, but the dog wouldn't move. He kept his gaze fixed on a single unattended suitcase, purple, worn, and silent, just feet from the security gate. Something about that bag was wrong. Seconds later, backup was called. The crowd parted, and as bomb squad officers arrived, the suitcase was carefully pulled aside, encircled, examined. There was no ticking, no wires, just weight. A dense kind of weight that felt more like a secret than an object. One officer crouched down, hand on the zipper, hesitation in his breath. What happened next made a room full of trained professionals stop cold, because what they found inside that suitcase wasn't a threat in the traditional sense. It was breathing, and it was looking back at them. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale, her lips dry and cracking. She couldn't speak. She didn't scream. She only blinked slowly under the harsh terminal lights, as if even that small movement hurt. The officers exchanged glances, unable to make sense of what they were seeing. Ranger didn't take his eyes off her, and neither did Grant. He knelt down, gently brushing away part of the blanket that had been wrapped tightly around her frail body. There was a wristband, hospital style. No name, just numbers. And inside the lining of the suitcase, barely visible, was the torn edge of a photograph. It showed a man's hand gripping a child's shoulder. The image was cropped, the face blurred. But that one detail, that single fragment, would trigger a chain of events far beyond anything the airport had seen. Because now the questions began stacking faster than answers could be found. Who was she? How long had she been in that suitcase? Why was no one looking for her? And who was the man last seen just 20 minutes earlier, dragging a nearly identical suitcase into the men's restroom and leaving without it? Was he watching from somewhere nearby? Was this girl part of something bigger? Was she the only one? She had a name once, a bedtime routine, a favorite color. There are home videos of her laughing in the backyard, jumping over sprinklers in a faded pink shirt with a juice box in hand. Her mother would later recall how she loved drawing animals, especially horses. But on the afternoon of June the 2nd, her small footsteps vanished somewhere between school and home. At first, they thought maybe she wandered off. A friend's house, a nearby store. But by nightfall, when her backpack was found abandoned near a public restroom 2 blocks from campus, the story changed. Flyers went up, volunteers walked the streets, a press conference was held, but the city moved on, and for over 2 weeks, her name slowly faded into the noise of daily life until Terminal B, until a purple suitcase, until a bark. Ranger wasn't a typical airport canine. His training had been rigorous scents, explosives, threats. But what made him special was his focus. Ranger didn't bark without reason. He didn't react to false alarms. Officer Grant Maxwell would say Ranger had instincts that went deeper than protocol. A few years back, while on patrol, Ranger had alerted on a suitcase that looked harmless. Inside, they found a trafficked child sedated and hidden under false paneling. That case changed both their lives. Since then, Grant and Ranger had become more than just handler and dog. They were partners. And for Grant, it was more than duty. It was personal. Because years ago, Grant had lost a daughter of his own. A drunk driver. A 2-minute delay that turned into a lifetime of grief. He never talked about it. But every shift, every search, every hour spent training Ranger was a quiet form of penance. A silent hope that maybe one day, saving someone else's child might ease the ache he never admitted to anyone. Sometimes dogs sense things before we do. Ranger had stopped cold for a reason, and now Grant wasn't letting go. The zipper moved slowly, metal teeth releasing one by one as if the suitcase itself resisted being opened. Officer Grant Maxwell braced his hand near Ranger's collar, but the dog stayed rooted, ears stiff, eyes locked on the bag. The moment the lid parted, a smell filled the air. Not blood, not rot. Something else. Something sterile, chemical, artificial. A mix of hospital-grade disinfectant and sweat. Then the light caught skin, pale, trembling, barely visible beneath a tangle of blankets and nylon. It was a child. A girl. Alive. Barely. Her breathing shallow. Her wrists bruised and bound with plastic ties. A strip of cloth over her mouth. Her cheeks stained with tears that had long since dried. Her eyes were swollen, not just from trauma but from days, maybe longer, without sleep or light. The terminal fell into a vacuum of sound. No one spoke. Even the radio seemed to go silent. Officers froze mid-step, passengers were herded away, and Grant dropped to his knees. He gently pulled the gag free. Her lips were blistered. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper that no one could understand. In her fist, clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white, was a piece of paper. Folded, torn, smeared with what looked like blood. Grant took it slowly, careful not to startle her. He unfolded it once, then again, until the words came into view. A child's scrawl, barely legible. Just 6 words. She's not the only one. For a moment, Grant thought it might be a mistake. A threat? A warning? A cry for help from the girl? Or someone else? But the words burned into his mind, repeating louder than the sirens now echoing through the terminal. She's not the only one. Airport security reviewed footage in a frenzy. They scanned every second leading up to Ranger's bark. And there, frame by frame, they found him. A man. Tall, wearing a baseball cap and dark hoodie. He wheeled a purple suitcase to the restroom. He walked out alone. No bag. No pause. Just gone. Disappeared into a crowd of travelers like a ghost. No fingerprints, no ID tags. Nothing in the suitcase to identify the girl. She couldn't speak. But that note said everything. Was this just the beginning? The paramedics moved quickly. But even with the rush, their eyes gave everything away. One look at the girl told them she had been somewhere no child should ever be. Her body was limp, her skin cold to the touch. There were signs of dehydration, malnutrition. Her pulse was faint but steady. They covered her with thermal blankets, started fluids, and wheeled her away under escort. Grant watched her disappear behind the sliding ambulance doors without saying a word. His hands still trembled from the paper she had handed him. 6 words. She's not the only one. That note wasn't just a warning, it was a window into something larger. The surveillance room inside the terminal became command central. Every available camera feed was pulled, slowed, and analyzed. At timestamp 2:17 p.m., a man appeared near the west gate. Average height, blue jeans, navy hoodie, face down. A purple suitcase trailing behind him. He entered the men's restroom. 3 minutes later, he exited. No suitcase. No hesitation. And then he was gone. From every available angle, he vanished into the crowd, like vapor. A technician froze the screen and enhanced a few key frames. On the man's left wrist, just above the bone, a partial tattoo. The curve of a number, maybe a 7, or part of a letter. Not enough to identify, but enough to know this wasn't his first time. The case was escalated in less than an hour. By evening, the FBI had taken over. Special agents, child abduction task forces, digital analysts. Everyone combed through the footage, searching for clues. Ranger was temporarily pulled from his shift, his work already done, but his instincts validated again. Grant was kept on as liaison. Not because it was protocol, but because no one knew the girl better than him. Even in silence, he understood her pain. She became his priority. Then something strange happened. Reports started surfacing from nearby states. Children missing under similar circumstances. A girl in Texas, a boy in Kansas, a pair of siblings in Utah. All vanished within the past 30 days. Each case involved a public area, a bag, a restroom. And in 2 of those reports, witnesses mentioned seeing a man with a tattoo near his wrist. The dots were there but not yet connected. And just when things seemed to be closing in, the first mistake happened. A tip from a toll booth attendant identified a man matching the suspect's description. Officers raided his apartment. Purple suitcase by the door, same hoodie in the laundry. But it wasn't him. He had an alibi. Hours of footage showed him at a job site miles away. The suitcase? A knockoff. The hoodie? Common brand. False lead. Worse still, another suitcase turned up in the back of a bus station in Oregon. Unattended. Purple. Security shut the place down for hours. Inside, nothing. Just old clothes. Another false alarm. Another dead end. Then, 3 days after the airport, inside a secured wing of the hospital, the girl finally opened her eyes. A nurse was adjusting her IV when she reached out, barely lifting her hand. The nurse leaned in. The girl's lips moved. One word. It was soft, but clear. Carter. The name echoed through the sterile hospital corridor like a whisper torn from another world. Carter. At first, it meant nothing to investigators. There were thousands of Carters across the country. But when the girl repeated it a second time clearer, firmer, something shifted. She wasn't asking for him. She was remembering him. A connection. A presence. A fear or a trust. No one could tell which. Agents began to dig. Slowly, a trace appeared. A missing persons report filed 3 years earlier. A teenage boy, 17 at the time, who'd vanished from a foster home in Nebraska. No follow-up, no media attention. Just another name in the system. But when his photo was shown to the girl, her reaction was immediate. She reached for the image. Her fingers trembled and tears streamed silently down her face. Carter wasn't her captor. He was her brother. And according to what they could now piece together, he had been on the inside. In a sealed interview room days later, Carter was found. Not by police, but by Grant. A message had been left in the hospital waiting room, scribbled on the back of a crayon drawing the girl had made. 3 words. He's trying too. Within 24 hours, a surveillance trail led to a homeless shelter in Albuquerque. Carter was using an alias, malnourished, sleep-deprived, but alive. His story unfolded like a confession too heavy for a boy to carry. He had run away when he was 17, not because he wanted to escape, but because he had stumbled into something he couldn't ignore. In one of the foster homes, he had seen children come and go, but some left with men who didn't work for the system. Questions weren't allowed. Answers brought punishment. He tried to speak up, but no one listened. And then one night, he was taken too. Moved across state lines, assigned a new name, trained, conditioned. For nearly 2 years he was part of the ring, until he found his sister again. She had been taken separately, through different channels. But one night by accident he recognized her face through a cracked warehouse door. He knew he couldn't go to the authorities. He knew he couldn't confront the others. So he made a choice. Get her out, even if it meant risking everything. He waited, planned, stole documents, created distractions. And on the morning of her escape, he drugged the handler, stuffed her into a suitcase with medical-grade sedatives and water, left her just outside the gate, and slipped into the crowd. He never expected Ranger. He never expected her to survive the confinement. But somehow she did. Now, with Carter in custody and agents poring over his story, something horrifying began to surface. This wasn't a local operation. It was part of an international ring. Children from multiple countries filtered through a network that reached beyond borders, beyond states. Carter handed over names, locations, coded messages, things he had memorized at great personal risk. And then he said something that chilled even the most seasoned agents. She's not the only one they've taken. There are more. And time is running out. It started with coordinates written in ink on the inside of Carter's forearm. A final message no one expected. Just 2 numbers. One set for latitude. one for longitude. The night before he was scheduled to give his full deposition, Carter was moved to a safe house, a modest motel just outside the city, where agents could watch him in shifts. But by morning, the silence was too long. The knock went unanswered. The door had been locked from the inside. Carter was gone. Not in the wind. Not missing. He had taken his own life. On the nightstand beside him sat a folded letter addressed to the girl. Inside, an apology and instructions, the coordinates, a final confession, and a closing line scrawled in shaky handwriting. They'll never stop if no one sees. Within hours, officers and federal agents followed the trail. The location led them to an abandoned warehouse outside the city limits. No signage, overgrown grass, boarded-up windows. But inside, behind a reinforced steel door in the basement, they found what Carter had feared would disappear forever. An underground holding area. Cots, cameras, medical equipment, passports, photos, and files thick, stamped, categorized. The operation had been meticulous, run with military precision. And the worst part, names. Not just aliases, real names, some of them familiar. Too familiar. One by one, arrests began. A doctor, a transportation manager, a customs officer, all people the system should have been able to trust. But the shock came when one particular photo was shown to the girl, now recovering under Grant's quiet care. She paused, blinked, then nodded. She knew him. And when that face hit the media, the country recoiled. A well-known community leader, a man who had been on television advocating for child safety programs, a man who had helped pass bills to protect the very victims he exploited. Denials came quickly, lawyers, statements. But then came the moment no one could forget. The trial. Weeks later, inside a packed courtroom, Ranger, now cleared to accompany Grant into witness session, sat quietly at his handler's side. The man took the stand. Calm, rehearsed, untouched by the gravity of what had unfolded, until Ranger stood up. Not barked, not growled, just stood rigid, alert, unblinking. And then, without command, he barked. Once, sharp, piercing, the same way he had at Terminal B. The courtroom went still. The man froze, his voice cracked, and in less than 5 minutes everything unraveled. He confessed to what he had done, to what he had covered, to what he had helped build and maintain for over a decade. He broke not under the weight of evidence, not under the pressure of law, but under the bark of a dog who knew. Sometimes a bark is louder than a scream. Ranger saved a life that day, not through force, not with weapons, but with instinct, with loyalty, with a bark that refused to be ignored. But that moment at Terminal B was just one suitcase, one child, one narrow escape, and it raises a question no one wants to answer: how many more suitcases go unopened? How many others are waiting in silence? In darkness? How many voices go unheard because they can't bark for help? Carter's story ended in tragedy, but was it also redemption? A final act to right the wrongs he once became part of? Or was it something more complicated? Guilt, fear, unfinished business. What do you think happened in those final moments? Was Carter a hero, or another player in a twisted game? Let us know in the comments. And if you thought this story was chilling, wait until you hear about the girl who escaped her captor, only to be returned by her own family. Subscribe for more real-life stories that will leave you questioning everything.